Hi, I'm Abby and this is Lucy, and we're from Infectious PR presenting a talk on an introduction to PR. PR is a bit of a weird one. I'm sure you guys are all really familiar with the fact that publications are becoming less and less, less people reading magazines, and there's so many other avenues to sort of get your content on, whether that be TikTok, Instagram, etc. But that being said, all these publications have their own social channels, so there's still loads of value in doing PR. And also from artists' perspective, I think, for example, these are some of the dance publications that we work with. When artists are applying for visas, for example, they need to be able to demonstrate that they have a profile, and one of those things is having stories in the media. So if someone is having a tour in the US, they might need to have 10 pieces of press basically to demonstrate who they are as a person. So that's definitely beneficial, whether someone sees it with value or not. Another really key thing for press is how an artist is positioned. So you might be a really upcoming artist, very, very small, but if you've got a really a look in Mix Mag, I don't know how to explain it. It's so good for your brand.
Yeah, it positions you in a certain world. You might end up being, booked for certain types of venues or shows that which deem you to be cool in a certain type of scene.
And I feel with press, it's just another string to your bow. So for example, if you are pitching your track to Spotify and you can say Mix Mag championed me as an emerging artist to watch, that's just something to speak about. Same for if Lucy was speaking to radio, she could be like, oh, DJ Mag has run a mix with them. It's all these sort of things build up the bigger picture. So whether publications are going to be less and less in the future, there is some still a lot of value in doing PR. So these are some of the dance titles we work with. So these probably would be the first sort of point of contact that we'd be pitching to for an emerging artist, and then it sort of naturally progresses up to more lifestyle titles. So this is if someone has a really great fashion look or a really amazing story. These are the sort of titles that you'd be aiming for next. And then after that, you'd probably be aiming for your nationals and other Miami News Times and maybe more bigger regionals, which have a massive demographic. So I'll talk you through a case study that we did for Folamour. I don't know if any of you are familiar with him, but he's great. He released an album during lockdown, which is a bit of a weird time actually for the music industry. But it sort of was a really nice, refreshing, sort of energetic album, which sort of lifted people's spirits. So it did get received really well. We worked on this particular campaign for 6 months. Probably the hero moment of the campaign was getting him on the cover of Mix Mag. It was a really weird time to be getting someone on the cover. So usually you'd go to the shoot, you'd have the amazing photos, someone be styled, there'd be a big thing. But this was really different because obviously in lockdown those things couldn't happen. So we had to do everything remotely, and there were so many emails back and forth, which was a shame, but still an amazing result. Sadly, during lockdown, Mix Mag pulled their print magazine as well, obviously due to funding and all that jazz. But their cover star feature is on their website still, and I think their reach is still 16 million or something ridiculous. And then together with that, they have their SoundCloud where they'll publish the mix which goes with the cover feature. And then his face was basically on all of their different social channels. So yeah, it was a big moment for the campaign. So for this particular campaign, he started sort of waterfalling his tracks as they came out. So when you work with a particular artist, you have to sort of really decide how much press that person wants to be involved with. Bruno Folamour is a very busy person, so in terms of interview opportunities and stuff, he only wanted to do the select ones, and rightly so because he is such a big artist. So the natural progression of how the campaign rolled out was various news pieces where he didn't really have much involvement, and then interviews sort of syndicated once a month up until when the album came out, which had the big moment of the cover star. since he had all this press, he's gone on to like have the most amazing year. Like he had a residency on Radio 1, and has like toured some of the most like the best festivals. And his manager often references the PR campaign as a way that he's been able to do those things. So sort of like going backwards. So how a PR campaign works. Same sort of story as radio, but lead time is so important, if not a bit more important.
Oh my God, I think it's way more important for PR.
Yeah, I feel like because there are less print magazines, there's less of a need to know before 6 months. But if you wanted to get into DG Mag, print magazine, you have to pitch for it 6 months in advance. The cover and the covers, they're like booked in 9 months in advance. So, and also with the lead time, you need to know the particular journalist that you're speaking to. So some journalists, obviously the way that the sort of industry is going, they might only work on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that's the only day you're going to get responses for them. So if you know you're getting the tracks coming out in a couple of weeks' time, you need to make sure that you're like going to them with enough lead time that they're going to have to write the story to get it out on release day. The story and the brand is probably one of the biggest things for PR, I'd say. So we work with a lot of white tech house DJs, and rightly so. There's a lot of publications which don't necessarily want to push that. I think it's so important to be more inclusive. Mixmag is one of the best, like I say, one of the best publications for sort of championing that. But that being said, there is still some amazing music run, made by white tech house DJs. So you really need to be thinking about your story and your brand. So how do you want to be positioned in a way that's going to make you really interesting, that you're going to be covered in these publications? So for example, if you're, I don't know, an Italian DJ and you're a bit of a foodie, could you talk about maybe cooking pizzas and making mixes to pizzas and stuff like that, like trying to get a bit more creative with how you're positioned. Another thing that's really important is how you look, sadly. If you haven't necessarily put a lot of time and consideration into getting some really great press pictures done, which make you look really professional and positioned in a way that you want to be positioned, publications aren't really going to consider covering you, because there's no way that they're going to put in a grainy picture of someone who's got like beans down their top. I don't know. Maybe they would actually, because maybe they would actually. Cool. Max and Marco, to be fair.
Yeah, because they're visual.
Yeah, it's platforms. A visual thing. But I'd say like if anyone is ever getting press shots done, like publications love them to be landscape. And preferably not done in like a weird studio with a bright colour in the background, because it needs to go with their look as well. And preferably not black and white, because they can make that black and white. You can't go backwards. The next thing probably would be where the music sits. So, for example, if you've made a drum and bass track, you're not going to be pitching it to, I don't know, a tech house writer at Mixmag, because not only is it like a bit insulting to the journalist, it's also just makes it look like you haven't done your research. So if you are ever going to pitch to a journalist, so just pitch a track out, make sure you do some research into what that journalist is covering. So, what gigs has that journalist been to recently? Like, social media is an amazing way to stalk people. You can see what they like, and also what they cover. In terms of contacts hunting is probably the biggest thing of our job, that we have to just make sure we're on all the time. Journalists these days, a lot more of them freelance, so it's really important to know where they're freelancing for, and also like, have you got the right email address? There's loads of different softwares like available that you can sort of stalk people on, some of them being Email Hunter and Rocket Reach. I'd say are probably the best tools, as well as Twitter. You can sort of do a back search to see when someone might have put their email address in. If you ever meet a journalist, just get their email, because sometimes you can guess their email as well. Like, everyone has the sort of same format, so it might be like first name, last name at bbc.co.uk. The next thing I'd say is content. So something I sort of touched on earlier is you've got all these publications which are posting stuff on their websites, but also social media is such a big thing for these publications. So you know, a publication might not necessarily run a story with your music, but if you've got some really great content of you making the tune or you playing out at a gig and it getting really well received, that's another sort of string to your bow to pitch to the journalist, because they have social media teams. So it's another really great way of getting in to those publications away from sort of traditional media. It's something I think you should always be thinking about. And then obviously results is the end goal, getting loads of coverage. But usually that would come from release date onwards. Yeah.